Hi, this is the Social Jello with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Jello with Angelo show.
What's up, and welcome to another episode of Social Jello with Angelo. Today I'm here with Tyler Steven Sharp of Mizu Martial Arts. Now, I said Mizu Martial Arts, but you were saying we had a little conversation off camera.
Yeah, I was saying it with you. Like everyone tries to pronounce it, more dominant over here in the States. But I like how you're saying it. It makes more sense. Misu.
All right, cool.
So should be saying it the correct way for sure.
So he also runs a YouTube channel. So if you look up MIZU Martial Arts on YouTube, you'll see his channel. This is how I found his stuff. He shares it all over the place. I originally found it on a Kajikembo site, so I actually assumed that he was a Kajikembo guy, but he actually has a really interesting background that is related to Kajikembo, because you mentioned small social jiu-jitsu, Wally J. I'm not a history buff, okay? So you Kajikembo guys always come after me when I start talking like this. To my understanding, Wally J is related to Danzar Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, which is related to Kajikembo, and Wally J is somewhere on the tree. I believe on our Kajikembo family tree, which has like thousands of names of everyone who's ever practiced the art. I believe Wally J is up there somewhere. I believe. And if I'm wrong, I'm really sorry. You can correct me in the comments and I'll be like, sorry. And I'll tell you right now.
I'm not sure either.
I'm not a historian. We'll have a historian come on here on another day to go over that. Title of today's podcast is Why Mix Jiu-Jitsu with Your Karate? Why? Right? Some karate guys would argue that if you end up on the streets rolling on the ground with the needles, the syringe needles and broken glass, you're just going to end up getting stomped on by other people. And then the jiu-jitsu guys would argue that if you're a karate guy, you go up against a jiu-jitsu guy, you don't know what you do with your grappling, you're just going to get choked out. So those are the arguments we see online. But whenever this kind of stuff comes up, as you know, I like to bring in people who have experiences and why they are the way they are. So with that being said, off camera, Steven had a really good story about how he ended up getting where he's at. So if you don't mind real quick sharing your background with karate and how you ended up in jiu-jitsu, how'd that end up happening?
Yes. So I did Shotokan when I was a kid. I started at like 8 years old, and I did that until I was about 14. And my instructor, my sensei, he just never would really break down katas and make it make sense for me. I was, had learning difficulties, and I needed to really see what was happening. It needed to make sense to me. And so the katas kind of just lost me, and I lost interest, and I kind of took a step back from it. And when I was, I did a little bit of boxing, and, I was just into lifting weights back then. I was young. And at that time, I was about 17 years old. And I ended up getting into a fight, and it was, both of us were engaged in it. I would have gotten in trouble too, but he ended up pulling a knife out and stabbed me while I was fighting somebody else at that point, because there was 12 against two of us. And it started off as just, there was three of them, and it was two of us and three of them, and we were having our altercations. And then all of a sudden their buddies rolled in, and then they were, he had numbers. So then he was ready to fight. So we started fighting, and after, I took him to the ground. Well, I didn't take him to the ground. I knocked him to the ground, hit him with a 1-2. He took a knee, hit him again. He was out cold. So his buddies rushed me, and I started fighting them. Well, it's not the movies. When people are knocked out, they don't stay out for long. They wake up. And when they wake up, they're enraged. They're either humiliated because they got embarrassed, or vice, they're seeing red. So he went in the house and grabbed a knife and came out just attacking me while I was in the process of fighting somebody else. And that just, he stabbed me 2 times, once in the femoral artery and once in the stomach, which almost killed me. I was, almost bled to death right there. This lady saved my life. She was holding pressure on my leg, stopping me from bleeding out. But other than that, that's what really woke me up to me needing to know close combat, because I was always about, and Shotokan karate is always about keeping the space. You need that striking distance, which is great, But in the real world, sometimes people just attack you or jump you, and all of a sudden they're on you. And if you don't know how to defend yourself against somebody actually having their hands on you, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And, and that's what woke me up to it. And I had anxiety, just being in crowds. And, I had to get over that. And that's when my mother, she ended up seeing this, jiu-jitsu place. And she was like, hey, you need to go try this place out. Go check it out. And I went in, and I was a punk. And I'm going with this green belt. And I'm like, he's going to kick my ass, and I hit him hard. And the sensei got mad. And he was like, we don't go like that here. We're just practicing. And I ended up going a little hard again, and he ended up gearing up. And the sensei came out and was like, all right, me and you. So we were sparring, and he ended up knocking me out cold. And right from that point on, I was hooked. Everything that he wanted to show me, I was just, every day was practicing. And he was teaching me, just Japanese jiu-jitsu. And it's not traditional, because he will take whatever works. He was, really big into MMA. And he was, from ground to judo to stand up and weapons. And that really helped me to overcome my anxiety. When in big crowds, you're not worrying about the what if. You're just relaxed, and what you're capable of doing. Like if somebody grabs you, you just react. And that's what muscle memory is important. Constantly repetition. People will try something once or twice and think that it's going to be there when the time comes. And if you haven't practiced it a lot, especially under pressure, and people resisting you, not just complying, that's a big thing. Too many people just, oh, you're going to sweep me, so I'll fall. No, work with people who want to fight back. That way you learn what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's important.
That's interesting. So I'm gonna break down. You said a lot. Points,
sorry.
A lot of points. No. You made a lot of great points, and I'm gonna start breaking down what I see and what I hear. So you made we'll just go to the last point you just said right now. This idea that you need resistance, because when you hear about the people throw around the term old school jiu-jitsu, and the first thing that I start thinking of is Aikido, and the first thing I start thinking of are these older folks, especially here in Japan. I'm not going to criticize what I see in the US, but I'll tell you what I see out here. I live in Japan. Older folks and an uke that just kind of goes, and no sparring whatsoever. Yes. They never learn how to punch. They never learn how to kick, and they don't really spar. So it's when I hear someone say old school jiu-jitsu, a lot of times it'll go straight to bullshido. But you said like the opposite of what most people would interpret as old school jiu-jitsu. You're like, no, you got to spar. You got to go against resistance. You can't just have someone be compliant. You can't have your training partner be compliant to whatever takedown or submission you're trying to do. They should be able to fight back to make sure that you can do it right, which is more of a, like this goes back to the other thing that you said about the idea that you went to a place to do jiu-jitsu and they were doing striking. Like he's like, hey, he was into MMA. And recently, if you haven't seen it, old school jiu-jitsu versus new school jiu-jitsu, I just released it 2 weeks ago, where we talk about that mentality and this change that's happening in jiu-jitsu with sport jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu that was really orientated to go and fight in a cage and to be used in self-defense in fighting scenarios. Not to say that new school jiu-jitsu isn't that. Please check out that episode because we break that down too. But there is this element about, and you said Wally J earlier, which comes more from small school jiu-jitsu, which is, and I want to make it clear to my listeners, we're not talking about Aikido when we say old school jiu-jitsu. And we're not talking about the original old school jiu-jitsu, because a lot of jiu-jitsu guys are going to be listening to this. And for those of you who don't know, I have a brown belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and a black belt in Kajukenbo. I should have mentioned that earlier. Yeah, well, now you know. And I also coach MMA, just in case this is your first episode. So what happens is some people mistaken the old school jiu-jitsu as the original Gracie curriculum, which looked again very similar to Aikido. Oh, some Gracie guys are gonna get mad at this, but yeah, it was a lot of like compliant. Here's how you do a Kimura. Here's how you do an Americana. Here's how you go from mount, from side control to mount. But it really wasn't that much sparring. It was just a lot of the self-defense stuff. And if you're a jiu-jitsu guy, you want to know how that looks like. A lot of your self-defense curriculum that you do during your warm-up right before you start practice, that comes from the original curriculum. So you mentioned that, and then you also mentioned the other point was the karate. Like you said about karate wants the distance, and
Yes.
karate argues that the distance will keep you safe, but then you found in your experience you didn't know how to control once the distance is gone. Oh, another thing,
You panic.
karate argues, a lot of karate guys argue that in the exact situation you're in, being jumped, that striking in karate is the best for that situation, and jiu-jitsu is the worst because you can only grapple one person at a time. Um, but in your experience, it was like the exact opposite. You said, yeah, I was handling it, I was using my karate, but once the distance was closed because there were so many people,
Yes. When you're fighting multiple numbers, the distance is gonna get closed.
yeah, and then you didn't know what to do because the karate that you learned didn't cover that, and so you
Yep.
gravitated towards this jiu-jitsu style. All right, so that's the summary. So now you're doing this new type of jiu-jitsu, this old school jiu-jitsu, as you mentioned it, and the instructor beats the crap out of you. You join you join the class. You decide not to say screw this, and you sign up.
Yeah.
What happened from there?
From there, he, put me through the ringer. I had to really earn his respect because, he just looked at me as a punk. And, like I said, at that point in time, I was a punk and I had some growing up to do. And he just kind of took me under his wing, and we'd go to seminars, and we would go to, all over the place, to New York, and we'd go to Boston, and just, we'd travel and go to schools, and we'd go to police academies and teach them, just takeaways and, chokes, and just, you're going to be vulnerable. People think that they can just have their head on a swivel all the time, and no one's ever going to touch me. Like, it's not going to happen. Like, if you can try to be that way, but as soon as you feel comfortable and you're, walking through a store, and, somebody can grab you at any time, you just don't know. And karate's like having that visible rope tied to me, tied to you, and we're always trying to keep it tight. We never want that rope to get loose. If you come in too much, I'm trying to back up, or I'm trying to take an angle to try to still keep that space. And it's important, if you get taken to the ground and you don't know how to get up from the ground, you're screwed. And most people know boxing and wrestling, and it doesn't take much time to practice, wrestling. Most people do it in school, and I find that's a lot of people's go-to. As soon as they get hit once or twice and they're overwhelmed and they know that the guy's got better hands, if I know that you got better hands than I do, then I don't want to keep throwing hands. I want to try something different. I want to try taking you to the ground, and you would kick my ass there because ground stuff more than I do. But I try to keep it standing if possible. I think you should try to keep it fight, especially in a street fight, because it's going to be numbers. Nobody walks down the street feeling like Tony Tough Nuts by themselves. It's when they got the numbers is when they feel tough. And so you got to be cautious. You got to make sure that when you're fighting that guy, that you're staying aware of where his friend is going, because that's how I got stabbed. I was tunnel vision. I was focused on somebody else, and next thing I know, the guy came. He woke back up. He had a knife, and he charged me and just started stabbing. And I didn't know that he was stabbing me at that point. Adrenaline. I just thought he was punching me, so I kept fighting. And it wasn't until somebody jumped on the back of my, they're trying to choke me out, and he's screaming, "I'm going to kill him." And I threw him over my shoulder, just, a simple judo throw up and over, and kicked him in the face. And that's when I realized, whoa, I'm dizzy. What's going on with myself? Like, what's happening? And I look over, and that's when I saw him. He was holding the knife, and I was just covered in blood. I looked down, it was just pumping out of me. And it literally felt like running a marathon, trying to breathe through a straw. Like, it's just never enough breath. But yeah, sorry to go back into that again, but I'm just saying.
No, because look, I think it's important to go back into that, because a lot of people, there's like two camps here. There's the sport martial arts guys that are just like, bah, I'm sick of hearing about the streets. Like,
Yes.
That's not where I'm at. I got my competition this week. I'm not a hoodlum. I know better. And I'm not going to deal with it. And then you got the other half of people who aren't much different from the first half. They're doing the same competitions. They're really not fighting in the streets all that much either, to be
Yeah, you
honest.
try to avoid that. For sure.
but they like to act like, you know, like that's all about the streets. It's all about the streets, right? So I think it's good to go back to that story, because we're going back to your real experience of 17 being stabbed in a street fight. That's where this is going right back to, which is back to our topic of why mix jiu-jitsu with your karate. You were a karate guy, and you, after that experience, decided to start doing more jiu-jitsu. So another thing that you mentioned that a lot of people don't talk about is this idea that the guy got knocked out, right? We always talk about those. I always say that the small differences between competition and the street. A lot of the stuff you do in competition will work on the street, but there's just certain things you got to be aware of on the street that aren't an element in competition. And one of them is that, and I've talked to John Hackelman. If you don't know who John Hackelman is, that's Chuck Liddell's coach. Every week I do a podcast with him, the Live Clean and Fight Dirty show, on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock live on YouTube on his The Pit channel. So check that out. Should have a link there. But he's always talking about the same thing. He's a UFC coach, and he's also a Kajikembo guy, which has a lot of self-defense oriented martial arts for quote unquote the streets and for people who do law enforcement and stuff. And he's always done the same thing. The lack of a referee.
No one's gonna say stop it.
No one's gonna say stop it. So yeah, so the guy can literally get knocked out, get back up, and you've seen this in the UFC. If you've watched the UFC, you've seen guys get knocked out, and the fight's over, and the guy wakes up and he comes in swinging, and the referee has to be like, "Whoa, the fight ended. You lost. You lost. Hi, well, good morning. Welcome back. You lost the fight, right?" And then sometimes they'll even sucker punch the guy who won, right? Because the guy who won was like, "Oh, it's over," and he expects the referee to. That's the referee's job. Like, hey, it's over. It's time to move on. But one thing that is really important, and we say this, and I know some of you are rolling your eyes as I say this, the whole situational awareness, like I said, this word gets thrown around a lot in the martial arts community. Situational awareness. It's small little things, these little nuances that in your case make the difference between life or death. Like if at that point a young, ready to fight, little bit ready to go, no off switch man would have had a coach or a sensei or someone in your life say, "Hey, you know, after you finish with the street altercation, it might be a good idea to get the fuck out of there." Because because nothing good comes. I've said this before, nothing good comes of sticking around a crime scene. Whether you are the perpetrator or victim, nothing good comes out of sticking around at a crime scene without any law enforcement around. Nothing good comes of it. A great story in Kajikembo is how one of our founders got stabbed and killed. A very similar situation like the one you were in a parking lot outside of a bar, gets in a scuffle. And I read the book. You want to check out the book, The Black Robe by David Tavares, goes over this history, and they go over the police report and how he died. Very similar to you, gets in a fight with 3 or 4 guys. One of his students takes off to go call the cops. I don't know, but he's now by himself with 4 guys, and he can handle himself. He does the style we do, so it's some striking and grappling, and he does. He takes down the guys, hits one guy, punches another guy, and then the police report later says by witnesses that after they're done, he's Hawaiian. He's like, "I got poked." He got stabbed. He's like, "I got poked." And then they asked him, the adrenaline, "Do you want to go to the hospital? We should go to the hospital." He's like, "Nah, I'll be fine." And he goes home and doesn't get medical attention in time. And by the time he gets to the hospital, he unfortunately passes away. And that's why in our style, we always check cover as a tribute to him. But I think that story is so important. A lot of the way it gets thrown on in my community is, "Oh yeah, he got stabbed," and they don't really talk about that little small nuanced detail. He didn't get medical attention. He stuck around the scene. The bad guys took off in a car, and they arrested the guy later, and he went to prison for murder. But there's a lot of stuff that in your story could have gone the same way, right? You said, "Hey, it's some luckily there was someone there who gave me medical attention," but just a small little thing, like the little things that as an instructor or a coach you can teach your students. Yeah, it's great to teach them how to block and how to punch and how to kick and how to grab and how to get someone close, but the smallest thing is like, hey, try to avoid it. When it happens, go get out.
Yes, after you defend yourself, get out of there. The party's over. Like wherever you're at, because the person's going to wake up and they're going to be madder than hell, or they're going to be humiliated, you know, and that humiliation could cause them to retaliate. They could, you know, go and get a gun. They could go, you know, get some friends and have backup waiting for you to come out. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. So I always tell people, once you get in that fight, you're done. Go home. You know, party's over. And especially like if there's a robbery with a knife, you know, I'll have students, they'll take away the knife and then they want to just stab the person back up. And I'm like, don't be doing, you know, because a lot of people that are trying to mug you are desperate people, you know, and if you just take the knife and you stab them, now you're also the bad guy. You just went from being the victim to being the bad guy, you know, and you can do what you want. It's your court date, but I suggest, you know, like, you try to get out of there and don't be the guy holding the weapon when the cops show up. Get the weapon out of there, you know, because people say, oh, this guy holding a knife stabbed people, and then you ended up taking the knife from the bad guy, and then the cops show up. They don't know who, they just see you with a knife, you know, or you with the gun. They're going to pull their weapons on you, and they're going to come after you because they think that you're the perpetrator. So it's important to, you know, get the weapon out of there and make sure that it's not in your hands when the cops come, and you try to get to safety, and always, you know, use the cops, you know, to buffer the situation. That's important. And go get help. If you got injured, you know, you should definitely go to the hospital for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. At the minimum, you should go to the hospital. So going back to our topic, and we're almost wrapped up here for our podcast. I did notice a lot of the stuff you do has a lot of judo in it. Like, you even use like some of the judo terminology. Like, I've heard it's like osotogiri, and I've following your channel for a while now. I'm kind of a little bit of a fan. Do like your stuff. Check it out. And I did put a link of this earlier for my viewers. Looking at what you do and how you put together your curriculum, and how you put together how you teach it, what would you say from judo, specifically judo, for those people, just to have a concrete example, what's some of your go-to favorites out of judo for, let's say unarmed? We'll go unarmed, because just for the guys that are rolling their eyes like, oh, I hate combatives, blah, blah, knife. We'll go straight to the unarmed, one-on-one fight between two people punching and kicking each other. What's your go-to? What do you like to go over for judo in that situation?
For when judo, I'll just go over, you know, regular Nippon Seinagi, just, you know, grabbing that arm, throwing through. If they're charging you, you know, swinging the knife or stick, whatever they're coming at you with. Or if, you know, they're grabbing you, I just like, you know, the regular shoulder throw and sotogaris. You know, sotogaris were great. If you can just wrap up the arm, palm blow to the face, control the head. Wherever the head goes, the body goes. And most people, when they do judo, especially beginners, they're not controlling the body. They're not controlling the head. So the person could resist them. But yeah, those are the main two that I like. And there's a couple, you know, other ones in there. I'm not sure. I'm still learning, you know, the names with some of them. They get a little, I don't want to pronounce them the wrong way.
I personally, this is why I live in Japan. I personally do not use the Japanese terminology for the takedowns for that reason. Because it gets really complicated. And like the judo guys are always like, oh, that's a sotogari or that's an aouchigari. And I'm just like, and I'll say it in English. And then when I teach in Japanese, I literally use like, you put your leg on the outside. Like, I don't even though osotogari is supposed to be outside leg reap, I think the translation is.
Reaping throw.
But the way I teach the students is I tell the students, like, I have guys who are black belts in judo who are my students. So they always laugh when I'm teaching. Like, the way I teach it, I'm like, yeah, you step here, grab the head, grab the arm, pull here, keep them in tight in the clinch. Now you're gonna grab your right leg or your outside, whichever position you're in. Make sure it's your inside leg. You're gonna go to the back of your opponent and you're going to sweep the leg. You're gonna bring your leg. You're gonna hook it down right here, and then you're gonna push them forward, and then you're gonna put their head onto the ground, and then go into a knee mount or whatever else you're gonna do. And I explain it just the way I just said it in English is the way I would say it in Japanese. I never mentioned anything about outside leg reap. Same with my karate blocks. When I'm talking about karate blocks, I don't use the Japanese karate terms, I'm literally saying outside block, like soto block. I usually Japanese block. They understand the word block, and I'm like, and you outside of the arm, inside of the arm, for the same reason, because I know there's real technical terms, and I just tell them that's not me. That's not me.
That's what I have to tell people too, because I was always trying to remember the technical terms, and my sensei was like, "Don't worry, don't get caught up so much in that. As long as you remember the techniques and you're good at teaching and you're good at doing the moves, that's really what matters, not so much the name." But at the same time, I still have a lot of students that are like, "What's this move called? What's this called?" And if I don't know it, they kind of look at you like, how don't you know that?
And then as a YouTuber, if you're a YouTuber, so if you do anything on YouTube, man, you those martial arts, those nerds will come after you hard. Like, you don't know what you're doing. But again, like, it's funny that you say that though. But I've had my Japanese students tell me. I had a police academy instructor tell me, he's one of my students, and he said, "I really like how you break down the techniques because it's a simple way that anyone can understand. Sometimes we get so caught up with the name of a move that we just say it. We expect our students
them to just know,
yes, this is the name of the move, and then we don't break down these small little nuances, like grab the back of the head here. If they're wearing a gi, grab the gi here, or grab the back of his neck. And you're more preoccupied with the technical small points than you are with the name of the move." He's like, "Yeah, it'd be nice if you did both, but but at the end of the day, the first technical part's the best." So we're about to wrap up, man. I want to thank you first of all so much for coming out, breaking that stuff down, talking about your experiences and how you got into it. Again, everyone watching, check out his YouTube channel. The link is here. Is there anything you want to say before you go? Anything you want to promote? Any type of, where can people find you? I said the YouTube, but is there anything else you want to say?
No, I only have the YouTube channel as of now. I don't have like I have a Facebook and stuff like that, but I don't have like a website or nothing.
Okay.
I just, I live in a small town, and I just wanted to, give back to the community. And I felt like, if I could give people a little bit of, I overcame the anxiety. If I could do that for other people too, then, it was a win, and I enjoy what I'm doing, so if I could have this as my job and, enjoy my job, and that was my life's goal. I always thought, like, if I was to be an old man, my one regret would not to open my own school. So I'm living my dream, and I got a chance to open my school, and it's doing pretty good. I'm happy with it, and it's growing every day. So
awesome.
Very stoked.
Again, reminder to my viewers, MIZU Martial Arts. You can Google search it. It'll come right up, and check out his YouTube channel. A lot of great stuff there. Mixing some striking and grappling. All right. Thank you very much for coming out. Thank you to my viewers for checking out the show. Make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends if you like the topic. And I release at least one of these a month, sometimes more. And I'll catch y'all next time.
Later.